What happens when a beloved young star walks onto daytime television and the room suddenly feels colder than the lights above it? Before we step into that moment, make sure you hit subscribe to Live Narratives, like this video, and drop a comment below, because today's story isn't just an interview, it's a live collision of worlds. The studio of The View buzzed with its usual rhythm, producers whispering into headsets, cameras gliding on silent tracks, the murmur of an audience waiting for something memorable. On the giant screen behind the curved table flashed the name everyone had come to see, Millie Bobby Brown. She stepped out with a practiced smile, soft blue dress catching the light, posture straight, but shoulders just slightly tense. At only 20-something, she had already carried the weight of global fame on her back since her breakout in Stranger Things. Applause thundered through the studio, warm and genuine. She waved, eyes bright, lips curved. But not every smile at the table mirrored that warmth. Seated among the hosts was Sunny Hostin, calm, composed, her notes stacked neatly in front of her. She adjusted her glasses, her gaze steady, analytical. The kind of gaze that didn't just look, it assessed. Millie took her seat. The applause softened into silence. The first few questions were safe.
Light.
Promotional. A new project, a beauty brand expansion, a reflection on growing up in front of the world. Millie answered gracefully, voice measured, hands folded in her lap. But then Sunny leaned forward. Millie, she began, her tone polite but edged with something sharper. You've been in the spotlight since you were a child. There's been a lot of conversation about young actors growing up too fast in Hollywood. Do you ever worry that the industry shaped you before you had the chance to shape yourself? The audience shifted slightly. It wasn't hostile. Not yet. But it wasn't soft either. Millie blinked once.
Twice.
Her smile didn't vanish, but it tightened. I think, she said carefully, that every experience shapes you. I've been lucky to work with incredible people who supported me. Sunny nodded slowly, pen tapping once against her notes.
Sure.
But there have also been criticisms about branding, about image changes, about maturity. Some say it feels calculated. The word hung in the air like smoke. Calculated. A faint murmur rippled through the audience. Millie's fingers intertwined more tightly. The camera zoomed in just a little closer. Her jaw flexed. Calculated, she echoed, her tone still controlled. Yes, Sunny continued, voice even. From child star to businesswoman. Some critics feel it's less organic and more strategic. What would you say to that? The room felt smaller now. Hotter. For a split second, something flickered across Millie's face. Hurt, perhaps. Or frustration. Then she straightened. I'd say, she replied slowly, that young women are often criticized for knowing what they want. A few claps erupted from the audience.
Quick.
Supportive. Sunny didn't smile. But is it about knowing what you want, Sunny pressed, or about being coached into wanting it? There it was. The shift. The energy changed from curious to confrontational. Millie inhaled deeply. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. She'd done countless interviews, red carpets, late-night shows. But this felt different. Less like conversation, more like cross-examination. I have a team, Millie said, voice firmer now. But I make my own decisions. Sunny tilted her head slightly. Even a more provocative ones? The audience gasped audibly. One of the co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Another forced a laugh that died quickly. Millie's eyes hardened, just a touch. Can you clarify what you mean? She asked. Sunny flipped a page of her notes. There's been online debate about your recent fashion choices and public persona. Some people feel it contrasts sharply with the image fans grew up with. They question whether it's authentic. The word authentic struck deeper than calculated ever could. Millie leaned back slightly, crossing her legs. Her posture changed, less defensive now, more grounded. I was 10 when I started, she said quietly. I'm not 10 anymore. The audience clapped again, louder this time. Sunny didn't retreat. Of course. But when young fans look up to you, do you feel a responsibility to maintain a certain image? The tension thickened. Millie's voice dropped a degree cooler. I feel a responsibility to be myself. not frozen in time for other people's comfort. The audience reacted, some claps, some murmurs. The studio felt divided. Sunny's expression remained composed, but her eyes sharpened. Some would argue that being yourself in Hollywood often means adapting to what sells. And there it was again, the implication. Millie's cheeks flushed slightly, not with embarrassment, anger. "I think," she said, choosing each word like stepping stones over water, "that it's interesting how often young women are accused of manipulation when they show ambition." The co-host beside Sunny jumped in quickly, trying to soften the moment. "We love ambition here," she laughed lightly. "That's what this show is about, strong voices." But the damage, or the spark, had already been lit. Sunny leaned back, folding her hands. "No one is accusing you of manipulation," she said calmly. "Just asking the questions viewers are asking." Millie met her gaze directly. For the first time, there was no smile. "And I'm answering them," she said. Silence. You could almost hear the hum of the studio lights. The camera cut briefly to the audience, some nodding in support of Millie, others whispering. On social media, phones were already lighting up. Clips were being recorded. Tweets were being drafted. Sunny offered a tight smile. Fair enough. But it wasn't over. Because sometimes, it's not the words themselves that ignite a moment. It's the way they're delivered. The pauses. The undertones. The suggestion that there's something beneath the surface waiting to be exposed. Millie shifted slightly in her seat, adjusting her dress, reclaiming her composure. "You know," she added, voice softer but steady, "I grew up in this industry. I've made mistakes. I've learned, but I won't apologize for growing." The audience applauded, longer this time. Sunny tapped her pen once more, her gaze unreadable. "Growth," she repeated. "That's a powerful word." The music cue that usually signaled a transition didn't come. Producers hesitated. The conversation felt too charged to cut away. And that was the moment everyone watching could feel it. This wasn't just a promotional stop anymore. This was turning into something else. Something awkward. Something raw. And the question hanging over the studio wasn't about fashion, branding, or maturity anymore. It was this. Was this a simple difference of perspective, or the beginning of a live television clash no one in that room was prepared for? The applause faded, but the tension didn't. It lingered, thick, invisible, pressing down on the studio like humidity before a storm. Millie adjusted the microphone clipped delicately to her dress, her fingers steady now. If she felt cornered, she wasn't going to show it. Not here. Not on a stage where every blink could be replayed 1,000 times. Sunny leaned forward again, her posture composed, voice calm, but firmer now. "Let's talk about influence," she said. "You've spoken about empowerment, about young women owning their choices. But critics argue that empowerment in Hollywood sometimes comes packaged in a very specific way. Glamour, sensuality, marketing. How do you separate empowerment from exploitation?" The word exploitation landed heavier than anything before it. A ripple moved through the audience. Millie's lips parted slightly, but she didn't answer immediately. She inhaled slowly, eyes flicking briefly to the crowd before returning to Sunny. "I think empowerment," she said carefully, "is about choice. If I choose how I present myself, that's power." Sunny nodded once. "But what if those choices are shaped by the industry's expectations? Can you truly say they're independent?" There it was again, that suggestion. That subtle implication that perhaps Millie wasn't steering her own ship. A co-host tried to interject. "I think what Sunny's getting at is the pressure." "I understand the question," Millie said gently, though there was steel beneath her tone. She folded her hands on the table, mirroring Sunny's earlier posture. It was subtle, almost symbolic. "I've had pressure," Millie admitted. "From producers. From studios. From media. From strangers online who think they know what's best for me. But at the end of the day, I live with my decisions." Sunny didn't blink. Even when those decisions spark controversy? Especially then. A few audience members clapped again, louder now, more confident in their support. Sunny's eyebrow lifted slightly. "There's a perception that you transition from child star to adult persona very quickly." Some fans felt blindsided. Millie's expression shifted, not to anger this time, but to something more vulnerable. I didn't transition overnight, she said. People just didn't notice me growing until they decided to. The room fell quiet. She continued, voice softer, but carrying through the studio with clarity. There was a child playing a character in Stranger Things. The audience fell in love with that character. But I'm not her. Sunny interlocked her fingers. No one expects you to be 11 forever. But they do expect me to stay frozen in the version of myself they're comfortable with, Millie replied, a faint crack in her voice that she quickly steadied. The air shifted again, this time less combative, more personal. Sunny tilted her head slightly. Is that frustration with the audience? Or with the media? Millie hesitated. It's with the narrative, she said finally. There's this story that gets written about young actresses. That we're innocent until we're suddenly too much.
Too grown.
Too confident. Too ambitious. A murmur of agreement rippled through parts of the crowd. Sunny tapped her pen lightly against the desk again. But isn't scrutiny part of fame? You chose this life. The words were factual, but their delivery? Sharp. Millie's eyes flashed. I chose acting, she corrected calmly. I didn't choose being dissected. A small gasp escaped someone in the audience. The cameras caught Sunny's expression, calm, composed, but undeniably challenged. And yet, Sunny pressed, your brand thrives on visibility. Social media, fashion campaigns, red carpets. That visibility invites commentary. Millie leaned forward now, matching Sunny's intensity. Visibility doesn't equal consent to disrespect. The audience erupted into applause, louder than before. One co-host raised her hand slightly, half laughing, half nervous. Okay, we're getting deep this morning, but it wasn't playful. Not anymore. Sunny's voice lowered slightly. No one is disrespecting you. Millie held her gaze. When my choices are framed as manipulation or strategy instead of growth, it feels that way. There was no smile now. On either side. Sunny inhaled slowly. The question isn't about you growing up. It's about whether the industry pushes young women to grow up faster than they should. For the first time, Millie's expression softened, not toward Sunny, but toward the topic itself. I agree that the industry has a problem, she said quietly. I've seen it. I've felt it. But I won't let that narrative strip me of agency. The audience quieted, listening more intently now. I'm not naive, Millie continued. I know how marketing works. I know how branding works. I've built a business. But building something doesn't mean you've been built by someone else. Sunny considered that. So you're saying you're in control? Yes. Completely? Millie paused. No one is completely in control in this industry, she admitted. But I'm more in control than people assume. That honesty landed differently. It wasn't defensive. It was grounded. For a brief moment, the tension eased. Then Sunny glanced down at her notes again. There's another layer, she said. You could feel the audience brace. There have been conversations online about the pressure on young female celebrities to maintain relevance. Do you ever fear that controversy keeps you in headlines? A sharp inhale from the crowd. Millie blinked slowly. Are you asking if I create controversy on purpose? She said. I'm asking, Sunny replied evenly, whether controversy benefits you. The room felt electric. Millie's jaw tightened again. Controversy benefits media outlets, she said pointedly. A few audible oohs echoed from the audience. Sunny's pen stopped tapping. You think this is about media exploitation? She asked. I think, Millie replied steadily, that sometimes strong young women make convenient debate topics. There it was, the line that split the room. Half the audience applauded immediately. The other half remained quiet, absorbing. Sunny leaned back, studying her. And you see yourself as that? A strong young woman being debated. Millie didn't hesitate. Yes. Silence. The word hung there, bold, unapologetic. Sunny's expression shifted, just slightly. Not defeat. Not agreement. Something more complex. Respect? Perhaps. Or calculation. Well, Sunny said finally, voice smoothing out. It's clear you have conviction. And it's clear, Millie replied gently, that you have questions. A faint, tense laugh fluttered through the audience. The segment was supposed to pivot to a lighter topic, her upcoming film, her philanthropic work. Producers signaled discreetly from offstage. But something had shifted irreversibly. This wasn't just promotional television anymore. It was generational. It was ideological. And beneath the polished smiles and studio lights, a deeper question lingered. Was this a necessary conversation about agency and fame? Or was it becoming a live televised power struggle neither woman intended, but neither was willing to lose? The studio lights felt hotter now. Not physically, but emotionally. The kind of heat that builds when two people realize they are no longer just answering questions, they are defending philosophies. A producer's voice faintly echoed from somewhere offstage, urging a shift in topic. A cue card lifted, a reminder about timing. But energy like this doesn't obey cue cards. Sunny straightened slightly in her chair, smoothing the edge of her notes, as if resetting the tone. Let's pivot for a moment, she said, her voice measured. You've spoken about agency and ownership. But some critics say that young stars often say they're empowered while still operating inside a machine that profits from them. Do you ever worry you're part of that machine? The word machine felt mechanical.
Cold.
Millie exhaled slowly through her nose. She wasn't flustered anymore. She was focused. I think we're all part of systems, she replied. Media is a system. Hollywood is a system. Even this show is part of a system. A quiet stir in the audience. Sunny's lips curved slightly. So, you're saying this is systemic? I'm saying, Millie clarified, that it's complicated. And I don't pretend it's simple. Sunny tilted her head. But some would argue that by participating, by promoting, by monetizing, you're reinforcing it. Millie's eyes didn't waver. And by questioning me in this way, she said calmly, aren't you reinforcing it too? There was an audible reaction from the crowd, half gasp, half admiration. One of the co-hosts let out a small, nervous laugh. Okay, this is getting philosophical. But no one was laughing fully. Sunny didn't flinch. We ask questions. That's our job. And I answer them, Millie responded. That's mine. The symmetry in their words felt almost scripted, but it wasn't. It was instinct. Two women used to defending their positions in very different arenas. Sunny leaned forward again, elbows lightly on the table. You mentioned earlier that you feel young women are often accused of manipulation when they show ambition, she said. Do you think that applies here? That this line of questioning is rooted in bias. The air shifted sharply. Millie hesitated for the first time in several minutes, not because she didn't have an answer, but because she understood the weight of this one. I think, she began carefully, that there's a pattern in how young actresses are spoken to versus how young actors are spoken to. The audience quieted completely. When a young male star builds a brand, he's called smart, she continued. Strategic. Visionary. When a young woman does it, it's often framed as calculated or manufactured. Sunny's expression remained composed, but her eyes sharpened. You feel I framed you that way? Millie met her gaze directly. I feel the language matters. The words weren't explosive, but they landed like they were. Sunny glanced briefly at the audience before returning her focus to Millie. Language does matter, which is why precision is important. I asked whether your evolution felt strategic. And I answered, Millie said softly, that growth isn't strategy, it's survival. That line silenced the room. Survival. It echoed louder than any applause. Sunny's pen stopped moving entirely. Survival from what? She asked quietly. For the first time since the interview began, something deeply personal flickered across Millie's face. From being reduced to one version of myself, she said. From being a character people refuse to let go of. From headlines that decide who I am before I wake up in the morning. The vulnerability in her tone shifted the energy. This wasn't combative anymore, it was raw. Sunny leaned back slightly, absorbing that. But headlines don't appear out of thin air, she said. They respond to visibility. Millie's jaw tightened again, but not with anger this time. With exhaustion. Headlines respond to clicks, she corrected. And clicks respond to controversy. Sometimes the controversy is real. Sometimes it's manufactured. And you believe yours has been manufactured? Sunny pressed. I believe it's been amplified. The audience murmured again. A co-host jumped in gently. It's true. Social media can blow things up beyond reality. But Sunny wasn't letting the thread go. There have been moments, she said, where your public appearances sparked intense debate. Fashion choices, interviews, statements. Do you ever step back and think, maybe I miscalculated? Millie didn't hesitate this time. Of course I've miscalculated, she admitted. I'm human. The honesty surprised the room. But miscalculating doesn't mean I'm being controlled, she continued. It means I'm learning in public. That phrase, learning in public, hung heavy. Sunny nodded slowly. That's a difficult position. It is, Millie replied. And it's even harder when growth is framed as scandal. There was a long pause. For a moment, it felt like the conversation might soften, like common ground might form. Then Sunny asked the question no one expected. Do you think you've ever used the idea of being young as a shield? The audience reacted instantly. Gasps, whispers, a sharp intake of breath. Millie blinked. A shield, she repeated. Yes, Sunny said evenly. To deflect criticism. To avoid accountability. The temperature in the room spiked again. Millie's posture straightened fully now. No softness. No vulnerability. I've taken accountability for my mistakes publicly, she said firmly. More publicly than most people ever have to. Sunny held her gaze. And yet, you often emphasize your age. Because it's relevant, Millie replied, her voice no longer gentle. I grew up in front of millions of strangers. That context matters. The audience clapped, stronger this time, more unified. Sunny's expression remained unreadable. But at what point, she asked, does context stop being explanation and start being excuse? The word sliced cleanly. Millie didn't look away. It becomes an excuse, she said slowly, when someone refuses to grow. I haven't refused. Silence again. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression. Social media was undoubtedly exploding by now. Clips circulating, captions forming, sides being chosen in real time. Sunny folded her hands once more. No one is denying your growth, she said calmly. The question is whether that growth has been fully self-directed. Millie's response came instantly. It has been as self-directed as any woman navigating an industry built long before she arrived. The audience erupted, this time not just in applause, but in vocal agreement. The tension had evolved. It was no longer just awkward. It was ideological, generational, almost symbolic. Two women, two perspectives, both strong, both articulate, neither willing to retreat. Sunny inhaled slowly, then glanced briefly toward the producers offstage. Time was running out. One final question, she said. The audience quieted immediately. Looking back at your younger self, the girl who first stepped onto a set, what would you tell her about the version of you sitting here today? For the first time since the confrontation began, Millie's expression softened completely. She looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up. I'd tell her, she said quietly, that people will try to define her, praise her, criticize her, freeze her, debate her. But none of that determines who she becomes. The room was still. I'd tell her, she continued, voice steady but emotional, that growing up publicly doesn't mean growing up. A long pause followed. Sunny watched her closely. And in that silence, something unspoken hovered between them. Respect? Disagreement? Understanding? Or perhaps the realization that this conversation had gone far beyond what either of them, or the producers, had planned. Because now the question wasn't just about branding or maturity. It was about power. And part 4 was about to decide who truly held it in that room. The silence after Millie's last words wasn't empty. It was charged. The kind of silence that makes producers freeze mid-gesture and camera operators hold their breath. The audience sat perfectly still, as if any sudden movement might shatter something fragile forming in the air. Sunny studied her for a long second. You speak with a lot of certainty, she said finally, voice calm but deliberate. Confidence. That's admirable. There was a pause. But confidence can also make it hard to hear criticism. A ripple moved through the crowd again. Millie didn't react immediately. She let the sentence settle, as if weighing whether it deserved defense or reflection. I hear criticism, she replied evenly. I just don't accept all of it as truth. Sunny nodded once. That's fair. But when millions of people raise similar concerns, doesn't that give you pause? Millie's gaze didn't waver. Millions of people also raised concerns when women wanted to vote, she said softly. Numbers don't automatically equal accuracy. The audience gasped, then burst into applause. It wasn't explosive. It was stunned. Sunny's expression tightened just slightly. Not anger, not offense, but recognition that the conversation had officially stepped into sharper territory. That's a powerful comparison, Sunny said carefully. Are you suggesting that criticism of your image is comparable to systemic oppression? I'm suggesting, Millie clarified quickly, that public consensus isn't always rooted in fairness. The studio felt smaller by the second. One of the co-hosts leaned forward, trying to smooth the edges. I think what Millie is saying is that public opinion can be influenced by bias. Sunny turned slightly toward her colleague, then back to Millie. Bias absolutely exists, she agreed. But so does accountability. There was again that word. Accountability. Millie nodded slowly. I agree. Sunny blinked, perhaps not expecting agreement so quickly. I've made mistakes, Millie continued. I've apologized for things I've said. I've learned from missteps. But accountability doesn't mean surrendering your autonomy. Sunny tapped her pen once more. And autonomy doesn't mean immunity from critique. The tension snapped back into place. Millie leaned forward, matching Sunny's posture exactly now. The mirroring was almost subconscious. Two strong presences occupying the same space, neither physically retreating. I don't want immunity, Millie said firmly. I want fairness. And fairness, Sunny replied, means being asked difficult questions. The audience shifted again, some nodding, some frowning. Millie's jaw flexed. I don't mind difficult questions, she said. I mind loaded ones. The word loaded hung heavy. Sunny's eyebrows lifted slightly. You feel my questions were loaded? Millie didn't hesitate. I think they were framed with an assumption. And what assumption is that? Sunny asked calmly. That my growth is manufactured. That my choices are orchestrated. That my confidence is calculated. Sunny's voice dropped half a tone. And you don't see any strategic thinking behind your brand? Millie exhaled through her nose, almost a small laugh, but without humor. Of course there's strategy, she admitted. I run a company. I produce projects. I negotiate contracts. Strategy isn't evil. The audience murmured in agreement. But there's a difference, she added, between being strategic and being inauthentic. Sunny's gaze sharpened. And who defines authenticity, she asked. You? The audience? The market? Millie didn't blink. I do. The certainty in that answer split the room again. Sunny leaned back slowly, folding her hands. That's a bold stance, she said. Because when you operate in a public space, authenticity becomes a shared perception. No, Millie replied, voice firmer now. It becomes a debated perception, but it's still mine to live. A co-host attempted another light pivot. Okay, let's take a breath. But the energy refused to soften. Sunny spoke again, quieter now but more pointed. Let me ask you something personal. The audience tensed instantly. Have you ever felt pressure, Sunny continued, to present a version of yourself that would silence critics rather than reflect who you are? Millie paused. This question was different. Less accusatory. More introspective. Yes, she said honestly. I have. The room shifted again. And did you?
Sunny asked.
For a while, Millie admitted. When I was younger, I tried to be what people expected.
Sweet.
Safe. Unchanging. And now, Sunny pressed. Now I'm tired of being palatable. The audience erupted, this time louder than any previous reaction. Some stood halfway out of their seats before sitting back down. Sunny's eyes flickered briefly toward the crowd, then back to Millie. "That's an interesting word," she said slowly. "Palatable." Millie nodded. "Women are often expected to be digestible," she said. "Comforting. Non-threatening. When we step outside that, we're called calculated or controversial." Sunny held her gaze for a long moment. "And you believe that's what's happening here?" she asked. Millie didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched. Then, "I believe," she said carefully, "that sometimes strong women challenge each other differently than men do." The statement was neutral on the surface, but it carried layers. Sunny's lips pressed together briefly. "Strong women also hold each other accountable," she replied. "And that's fair," Millie said. "As long as it's balanced." The audience quieted again, sensing the final stretch of the segment approaching. Sunny glanced at the clock off stage. Time was nearly gone. "One last thing," she said, voice composed once more. "If a young girl watching this feels confused, torn between who she is and who the world expects her to be, what would you tell her?" Millie didn't hesitate this time. "I'd tell her the world will always have expectations," she said softly. "But those expectations shift. Your identity shouldn't." The studio felt still again. "I'd tell her that it's okay to evolve," Millie continued. "Even if people call it strategy. Even if they call it controversial. Growth doesn't require permission." The applause this time was long. Sustained. Not divided. Sunny nodded slowly. "Growth also requires reflection," she said. Millie met her gaze. "And I reflect." The tension hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed. What began as awkwardness had turned into something layered, part confrontation, part philosophical debate, part generational clash. As the theme music began to rise faintly in the background, cameras pulled back slightly, capturing both women in the same frame. Two confident figures. Two unwavering perspectives. Smiles returned, but they were thinner now.
Polished.
Controlled. And as the segment officially wrapped, one thing was certain. This conversation wasn't ending when the cameras stopped rolling. Because outside that studio, millions were already choosing sides. And Part 5 would reveal just how explosive the fallout would become. The music swelled. Applause filled the studio. Cameras pulled back, capturing wide smiles, polished composure, the illusion of closure. But the moment the red recording light dimmed, the energy shifted again. The audience wasn't just clapping anymore, they were buzzing, whispering, glancing at each other with raised eyebrows. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others nodded with quiet approval. A few were already typing furiously on their phones, thumbs moving at lightning speed. Backstage assistants moved quickly, guiding Millie toward the exit corridor. Sunny remained seated for a brief second longer, her expression thoughtful, unreadable. Because everyone in that room knew what had just happened. It wasn't just an interview. It was a moment. And moments, in the age of instant replay and viral clips, don't fade. They multiply. Within minutes, snippets from The View were circulating online. The clip of Sunny asking, "Do you think you've ever used your age as a shield?" was already being replayed in slow motion. Millie's response, "I'm tired of being palatable," was turning into a caption, then a headline, then a rallying cry. Trending tabs began to light up. Think pieces formed in real time. Some praised Sunny Hostin for asking tough but necessary questions. Others accused her of unfairly targeting a young woman who had grown up under relentless scrutiny. Meanwhile, fans of Millie Bobby Brown flooded comment sections with fiery defenses. They clipped her line about visibility not equaling consent to disrespect and turned it into a graphic. They posted side-by-side screenshots, Sunny leaning forward, pen in hand, Millie leaning forward, gaze steady. It became symbolic. A generational face-off. A debate about media, power, and who gets to define authenticity. By the time Millie stepped into her car outside the studio, her publicist's phone was already ringing nonstop. She handled that incredibly. One voice insisted through the speaker. "It's dividing people," another warned. Millie leaned back against the seat, staring out the tinted window at the blur of city buildings passing by. Her reflection stared back at her, calm on the surface, but beneath it, the adrenaline still pulsed. She replayed moments in her mind. The word calculated. The word shield. Palatable. Had she been too sharp? Too defensive? Or had she simply refused to shrink? Across town, Sunny sat in her dressing room, removing her microphone with steady hands. A producer stepped inside cautiously. "Social media is exploding," he said quietly. Sunny gave a small, knowing nod. "Expected," she replied. "But it's intense," he added. "Some are saying you went too hard." Sunny met her reflection in the mirror. "Hard questions aren't cruelty," she said evenly. Still, even she felt it, the weight of the exchange. The tightrope between accountability and perception. Between journalism and personal undertone. Because this hadn't been just about branding or fashion choices. It had become something bigger. By evening, major outlets were running headlines. Awkward clash on daytime TV. Empowerment or evasion? Strong women, stronger words. Clips replayed across feeds. Reaction videos popped up within hours. Comment sections became battlegrounds. Some viewers argued that Sunny had done exactly what a seasoned journalist should, pressing beyond rehearsed answers. Others felt the tone crossed into interrogation. And Millie? She became both hero and headline. Young fans praised her composure. Older viewers debated whether her confidence bordered on deflection. The narrative fractured into 1,000 interpretations. Late that night, Millie opened her phone. Notifications flooded the screen. Support.
Criticism. Memes.
Think pieces. She paused on one clip in particular, her own voice saying, "Growth doesn't require permission." She watched it once, then twice, then locked her phone. Because beneath the noise, beneath the trending hashtags and split opinions, one truth lingered. She had spoken for herself. Sunny, meanwhile, scrolled through reactions of her own. Some praised her courage. Others accused her of undermining a young woman's lived experience. She sighed softly. Live television doesn't offer rewrites, only reflections. The next morning, both women returned to their routines. Interviews, meetings, scripts, segments. But something had shifted. For viewers, the moment became a cultural talking point. For Millie, it was another chapter in growing up publicly, another lesson in navigating a world that both celebrates and scrutinizes ambition. For Sunny, it was a reminder of the razor-thin line between challenging and appearing combative. And for the audience, it was a mirror. Because the real tension wasn't just between two women at a table. It was between perspectives. Is growth always authentic? Can ambition be strategic without being manipulative? When does accountability become overreach? Those questions didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling. They followed viewers home. They sparked debates at dinner tables, in comment sections, in group chats. And now they land here with you. So what do you think? Did Sunny push too far? Or did she simply do her job? Was Millie defensive? Or was she right to protect her narrative? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. And if you want more explosive, cinematic deep dives into the moments that make headlines and divide audiences, make sure you subscribe to Live Narratives, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to see both sides of the story. Because sometimes the most powerful drama isn't scripted. It's live.